Hello and welcome to today's A-Team Group webinar on how to establish data quality and data governance for analytics. My name is Sarah Underwood. I'm an editor at A-Team Group and I'll moderate today's webinar. Our expert speakers today are Ellen Gentile, Director of Enterprise Data Quality and Data Quality Incident Management at Sumitomo Mitsui Banking Corporation, Beryl Diaz, Manager Global Risk Analytics at HSBC, Nick Jepson, Financial Services Specialist at Semaki, David Tabbert, Global Head of Technical Operations and Equities for Bloomberg Data at Bloomberg, and Matt Flenley, Marketing and Partnerships Manager at Didactics. I'll ask them all to introduce themselves in a while, but I just want to say a couple of things about how you can make best use of the webinar. To the right of your video section on your screen, you'll see a panel for polls and one for questions. We'll be running 3 poll questions in the webinar, so please do answer them. They will come up to the right of your video, and it'd be great to hear your opinions. Also, if you'd like to ask questions to the experts during the webinar, please write them in the questions section, and they will come to me and I can ask the questions. You can do that as often and frequently as you like, and we'll get through as many questions as we can. So thanks for that. And just something else you can see on your screen in the it's called additional options bit at the bottom. You can see some of the other A-Team Group resources, and you can register for next week's Data Management Summit Virtual, which is really shaping up to be something of an event. Or you can download a white paper on deploying observational learning for improved transaction data quality. That's for me for now, and let me come to our speakers and ask them to introduce themselves. So Ellen, coming to you first.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Sarah. I'm Ellen Gentile. As mentioned, I am the Director of Data Quality, Enterprise Data Quality and Data Quality Incident Management at Sumitomo. I've been doing this for 5 years now. I'll probably be doing it until I'm in a wheelchair and trying to get data quality deployed throughout all the data ecosystems. And it's great to be here. Thank you.
Thanks, Ellen. Coming to you, Beryl. Can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, thank you. I'm Bilal. I work as a manager, global risk at HSBC, and I have been working in the data industry and analytics for the past 15 years. Yeah, I live and breathe data, and yeah, I'm excited to be here.
Thank you very much indeed. Coming to you, Nick.
Good afternoon. I'm Nick Jepson. I'm the Financial Services Implementation Partner for Semaki, the Intelligent Data Hub suppliers. I've been working in financial services for about 25 years, and for the last 15 years, really been focused on data governance, data quality, and regulatory change. Looking forward to speaking with the others over the next few minutes.
Thank you. And David.
I'm David Tabbert. I'm responsible for the equity product, the data equity product at Bloomberg, as well as our data technology division within Bloomberg Data. Mainly, we focus on the automation and the pipelining of the content to our various product sets at Bloomberg. But we have a large presence within ensuring we have not only quality of data, but the policies, the technology to support the policies as well. And I'm really excited to be here to talk about data quality and governance as well.
Thank you. And Matt.
Hi, thanks, Sarah, and hello, everybody. I'm Matt Flenley. I joined Didactics in 2017 after spending 10 years being frustrated with data in a bank. And thankfully, I now work for Didactics, and we provide business user-focused, no-code data quality and matching tools, and equally looking forward to the conversation today. Thanks.
Thank you all. And let's get on with this discussion. But first, an audience poll question. You can see the question to the right of your video, and it is, what are the key challenges of data quality and governance at your organization? You can opt for as many things on the list as you like. And while you go ahead and do that, let me come to Beryl, if I may, to set the scene and explain the key challenges of data quality and data governance in terms of analytics as you see them.
Sure. Thanks, Ella. One of the fundamental challenges of data quality is the legacy systems that the organizations have. Oftentimes, business takes over other companies, or there are other legacy systems. There is another issue with changing technology. So systems is one of the challenges. Along with systems, the business brings, if the business is huge, there's a problem with the large volumes of data. That's another challenge that the businesses are facing because larger the volumes, more is the resources that will be required, higher is the cost. So there is again the cost pressures that the business has to face. So that being said, on the governance side, the main issue is the accountability, the ownership. To implement data quality, what we need is real accountability and ownership that the different parts of the organization has to take, because we can't implement data quality in silos. We have to implement more at the strategic level. So we need more accountability. So that is something that's a challenge that we all need to overcome. And because it needs very cost, there's a cost involved here, there's a resourcing involved here. We need the buying at the most senior most level. We need the CDO level buying. Otherwise, it becomes difficult to really implement data quality and really see its benefits. So that's something that's again a challenge. So these are the fundamental challenges. And one thing I see personally from my experience is quantifying the benefits in terms of dollars of these programs that we run to convince our stakeholders and to convince to our management and to our customers the value that it brings. So quantifying the benefits of data governance is something that's again an evolving, and it's also a challenge at times.
Okay, thank you. We'll come back and talk about those challenges. Matt, would you like to add any further challenges that you see?
Yeah, absolutely. I was reading recently that one of the directors of KPMG in the US said recently that if the data is not reliable or of poor quality, then less than optimal business decisions are likely. And I find it funny because saying less than optimal is such a fantastically downbeat way of saying bad. But maybe we in data management don't help ourselves when we hold back from using language that scares people. But the fact that it's likely that bad business decisions will arise from unreliable or poor quality data is probably the most fundamental challenge for analytics today. And I think probably the challenge is an image thing. I was chatting with another data leader in Canada recently about how everyone loves watching and hearing an outstanding musician play, but they're not really that interested in the hours and hours of method and practice, improvement, and plain old hard work that it takes to become world class. I think in a practical and specific sense, the dawn of production machine learning means that it's now expected for business users to self-serve for analytics, though in many ways they lack the tooling or the capability to assess the quality of data that they want to use. Being able to short circuit this time and capability gap is the biggest single challenge that people are coming to talk to us about.
Thank you. And David, how do you see it in terms of challenges?
Yeah, I mean, our challenges certainly align with many of the points Viral made. I can add, from our standpoint, I think the speed, the consumption of the data has changed, the use cases has changed, which really requires you to make adjustments in a more real-time nature versus in the past might have been in batch, where you had time to react to things and really think about things. So you have to be more nimble. From a governance standpoint, I think for us, it's balancing the requirements of the stewards, the tools that they need, the user experience they need, the investment they need against what does the firm really need from a regulatory standpoint, as well as a data discoverability standpoint. This requires investment. It requires people to do this work, and balancing their needs versus what the firm needs is a real challenge that we're still trying to figure out. How to best support long term and scale too. Keep it at scale.
Okay, thank you for that. And let's see the poll results, if we may. Okay, many of those things were mentioned. David, would you like to comment on that?
Well, I think that legacy systems, I know Viral mentioned it's number one. For a mature business like Bloomberg, things do evolve over time. You grow your businesses as efficiently as you can, and over time you accumulate technical debt, decisions that were made that you don't always understand why they were made, and to unwind them into an elegant system, thread them into an elegant system is absolutely a challenge. So it's interesting to see how well we're aligned there. I think that's the challenge of a mature business, and also getting the buy-in from an investment standpoint, because it can feel like the scope of what you're taking on is just so massive, because you have to unwind all the decisions that were made in the past and then adapt them to your new paradigm.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. Okay, moving on and bringing you in here, Ellen. What approaches can FIs take to establish data quality?
In a nutshell, pardon me, it's not a simple process. I think of all the dependencies, and really it comes down to data governance and data quality, and having domains that are activated where you have data stewards being tapped to be data stewards or subject matter experts, and having that policy and procedures, and having domains and getting all of that metadata into your glossary so you have the context and that they're adding the data quality standards as rules. I think the biggest thing is the speed to market and how much coverage and scalability. Depending on your tool set, it can be very, very long and tedious. So you want to, mature to data quality as a service, where some technical stakeholders might be coding or, developing some pseudocode, and then you can pass it along and review it and test it and push it through the SDLC process, because that's one of the caveats that people don't really talk about. They're like, okay, we just want to run DQ rules. Well, you have to follow the SDLC process and test them. So that's the way forward, but there's a lot of things that have to be in place. If you want to use machine learning or some of the more sophisticated AI, you have to set up data classes. So there's a lot of pre-work that you do have to think about in order to say, hey, this is name and address class, or these domains have these rules. Let's get those rules running, and then have your tool pick up other, terms similar to that. Say, hey, is this type of rule? Is this the same term or the same class? Let's apply a DQ rule there, and you can scale it further and deeper out there. And I think that it's low code, no code is the future, and definitely being able to help people and the stewards easily, rapidly deploy DQ rules, because the regulators and the regulatory is always the concern for showing through your lineage where you have controls and how many of them.
Okay, thank you. Nick, what would you say here, how to approach these problems?
So I think there's some very good points already. I would focus on the people side of it, as well as process and technology. We've talked a bit about technology and some of the amazing new technologies that are emerging. But at the heart of this, you've got to win the hearts and minds of the people involved, and you've got to make them understand what's in it for them. And that's not a combination. It's not easy to identify benefits cases in all areas. But certainly there are plenty of emerging threats. You've got large fines to Citi in both the US and the UK for data issues, for example. And they're not alone. There's many, many others out there, but they're the most public ones most recently. And having spoken to a number of clients in the US, they're very, very focused on data quality as a result of that, but challenged by trying to think, how do they motivate people to engage in it? And for me, the key is really short, rapid change, because it's very easy to start off a process of trying to boil the ocean by solving all of these more esoteric governance principles all in one go. But actually, snapshot, pacey attacks on data quality in particular areas where there are tangible benefits can make a real difference in as few as 8-10 weeks. Provided you have the hearts and minds of senior stakeholders to back you up.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. And Matt, coming over to you, what technologies, tools and services can help firms achieve data quality, and how can different types of techs and tools be used together or even simultaneously sort of to further improve data quality?
That's an excellent question, Sarah. And as a tech vendor, I'm going to resist the very obvious answer. But what I will do is share what we've been hearing. Firstly, this is an area that's already seen a lot of investment over the years, as all the panelists have already been saying, whether that's in technology, in processes, or people, or all of it. And perhaps it's one of the reasons why it's not exactly as exciting a prospect as analytics, where tangible business benefits appear to be tantalizingly close. The best approaches that we've seen, whether that's from us or from other firms in our space, include three specific things. Firstly, business user-focused platforms, which Ellen's gone into already, that mean that rule building and automation aren't limited to just those who can code. And this answers that question I mentioned at the start, where business users who know pricing or risk profile or regulatory standards can rapidly implement policies and rules themselves rather than having to hand it through to some third party to interpret it for them. Secondly, having the ability to integrate with anything. Now, whether that's data governance systems, lineage systems, metadata repositories, and so on, that flexibility, rather than being prescriptive about, if you want to do data lineage, you must do it in this specific space. That's the approach that's winning. A lot of it features API-driven interoperability between systems and solutions. So it's a crucial thing to know that you can be API-driven but still be no code. So much effort is going into putting these capabilities into business lines, and so similarly in Datactics, we've put a lot of effort into making it easy for business users to pull down data from an external source via API and kick off a process using an API in the system, but neither of which needs coding to configure or run. And my third point on that is again, it's an AI impact. I'm going to keep coming back to AI because it's highly relevant in this area. At the minute, we're using AI to augment our existing platform to dramatically reduce the amount of upfront manual work that needs to happen in DQ operations. For example, in entity resolution, where we've been able to reduce the amount of ambiguous possible matches that need to be reviewed. Hopefully that goes into a bit of how that technology can work together there.
Thank you. Nick, what would you say here in terms of technologies? Anything you'd like to point out particularly?
I'm probably not as good at Matt at avoiding mentioning the product that I'm working with, but data governance is at the heart of an integrated data hub where you sort of have business intelligence and analytics either side of that. I think the key for me, this is coming back to the people and the motivation side of it, as understanding what success looks like, is trying to laser in on particular measures that mean a lot to senior stakeholders on the business side. So, for example, if you pick the treasury area of financial institution, there's significant cost in there from lack of data accuracy, lack of timeliness, trust in the data, not just capital loading, as a result of Pillar 2 in Basel, but also just the general forecasting and management of your funds positioned at your correspondent network can really be a problem. And you can look at tens, if not hundreds in some cases, of millions of pounds of benefit a year, and quite quickly start to achieve these by, as I say, small tactical pieces of work that use a thoroughly integrated data hub. Okay,
thank you. Data hubs do seem to be the way people are going at the moment, but we'll come back to that, I'm sure. David, bringing you in, what best practice approaches can be used to implement effective data governance?
Well, we talk about tools, but I think we also got to talk about the culture of your organization and understanding the consumer's use case for the data as well. I think people jump into these projects wanting to solve, a sort of an esoteric problem, but in reality, businesses have real use cases for data analytics. And if you're just you're not going to also get buy-in if the groups see this as red tape. I think someone mentioned earlier about getting buy-in. It has to be tied to something that the organization desires to get to, that they can see explicit ROI, and that helps from an investment standpoint and from an ownership and a buy-in standpoint. But it also really helps from getting the different groups to compromise and agree. Sometimes to adjust their line of thinking so that you can have consistency across the group, because consistency is the only real way to make use of data when you talk about data analytics. So, for us, really, it's about tying it, understanding the use case and being able to scope things to an achievable objective that your organization values. If people just see it as red tape and policy, they will check the box for a while, but after a while, it won't scale, and it won't have that enterprise level result that we are really hoping for when you take something like this on.
Okay, thank you. Ellen, what would you add in terms of data governance?
It really does take the force of the CDO organization to bridge the gaps, and it is true, a people, process, and technology is really the people focus, where you have different, legacy systems or different domains of data or group or subsidiaries, and they are all working hard to sustain their business model, and then you're coming in and saying, oh, we need to have you think about data governance. So you have to be able to clearly articulate the framework that you've created, how this is being organized and how it's going to be rolled out and the tools and how it will over time benefit them. But, when it comes to, a lot of financial institutions, regulatory is really the not the carrot, it's the stick. And, and there's a lot of resistance because IT projects are commonly pushed aside, or big projects or marketing projects are pushed aside for regulatory. So people want to get access to their data. You have to show them that there is an end state, end game, where you can understand the data better. You can understand where it comes from, authoritative data sources, and the quality of that data. Make your regulatory reporting teams happy. And then the people who want to do analytics and really use it, they have known data quality, or they can decide, oh, the issues here don't really impact what I'm planning on doing in my prototype or my demo. It's a lot of work. It is a lot of handshaking and having presentations and walkthroughs. It takes a village to do it, but it takes the CDO office and a force to bridge those gaps.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. And coming back to you, Nick, technologies and tools for the task when it comes to data governance.
So there are many tools out there. I mean, the Intelligent Data Hub, we've mentioned before, bringing together all of the different aspects of data governance, but also with the ability to draw insights and do it in a business-friendly fashion. So it doesn't have to be the data specialists in all cases that are analyzing the data sets, the quality of them. But the other side of it is making sure that access is easier. We started off earlier in this session talking about legacy data structures, legacy systems, finding a way to easily glue bits of data together from lots and lots of different locations of legacy infrastructure without having to rebuild interfaces, bespoke interfaces, is the enabler for organizations that have not invested when they've merged and acquired organizations or changed. It's the way to enable them to move forward and to take control. The other side of the equation is you've got to understand and be able to measure the quality that you are generating from this process and be able to reward people. And it needs to not just be the stick, the regulatory stick, but also, there are ways to provide value to people in the business up front for entering the data correctly, whether it be, data trade capture, whether it be tidying up and maintaining reference data sets appropriately, but just doing the basics well almost needs rewarding and having the analytics to identify whether there's problems caused by that and then finding a scheme to encourage the cultural change to change behaviors so people focus on the quality and understand why it's important, not just to the organization, but also to them, can really make a difference quickly.
Okay, David, what would you say here in terms of data governance and technologies and tools that can really make it work well?
Yeah, at Bloomberg, we use a combination of our proprietary homegrown solutions. We use open source platforms as well as third-party tools. So we understand that there is not a one size fits all when it comes to the tooling itself and the long-term management. Our goal is to empower, I know we keep talking about people, empowering people to find the anomalies, to find the irregularities, to be able to do efficient surveillance of our systems, realizing that this is, again, not always the first thing that people think about when they think about how to manage data. But when we think about the tools themselves, they kind of fall into a couple of categories for us. You have your data catalogs, where you manage your metadata, where you make your metadata discoverable, and you are able to bring transparency into what's possible as far as how you categorize your information. We do a lot of reporting and telemetry as well. Being able to monitor as things change. Our taxonomies, our systems of our products evolve every day. We're in an environment where we're in rapid growth. So being able to have reporting and transparency, continual transparency into what's being added to our systems and what needs to be modeled into the system and what levels of modeling are actually required. Because there is a maturity model I would imagine for most organizations where your level of investment of enrichment in the data will vary, again, based upon the use case and based upon the value it provides your business, and having reporting as an understanding what level of investment you're making in your data at every stage in the maturity model is really important. And then the third big thing for us is, and we mentioned this earlier, is ownership, especially when you work in a larger firm where there's many different stakeholders that contribute towards these policies and setting precedent. You need to have firm ownership and accountability, and ensuring that people that are making these decisions are communicating with their counterparties, whether they're sitting on the same side of the fence or they're working with the consumers and the users of the data. So having systems that actually track who makes changes and audits. I know it seems like something that's sort of fundamental to systems in general, but you'd be surprised how much goes on as far as manipulating data models and schema evolution that really isn't tracked systematically, where decisions are made and people just don't know why they're made. A big part of that is being able to systematically track ownership and who are the stewards of this data. So again, it might be overgeneralizing, but I think, in general, the larger problem you have to solve, I think you have to really be able to understand who's owning each piece of it.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very much. We have an audience question, and I'm going to put it to both Nick and David. It's about culture. We've talked a lot about culture, and I'm going to give you a little bit of time to think about it, because it says, we have a real cultural problem around data quality. How can we address this? Well, you've talked quite widely. Whilst we take the next poll, could you both sort of come up with your top 3 ideas to help this questioner as to how they can, begin to tackle that problem of culture? Meantime, let's take another audience poll. And the question this time is, to what extent has your organization combined data quality and governance to improve analytics? So whilst you do that, let me come to Viral, if you will, to talk about best data quality and governance and how they can be combined to produce more accurate analytics.
Sure. Data quality is why do we do data quality? I think I want to just take one step back. We do it so that the data is fit for purpose for our business needs. So, for example, if for analytics is my business need essentially, because analytics is what thrives on data. So, what it needs is accurate data, complete data. So, a data that can be relied on. So, how do we achieve that? Partly it is achieved through data quality, and partly it is going to be achieved through data governance. Data quality alone will not help us create the best data that we need for analytics, because while data quality will tell you the issues in your data, we need a mechanism to drive the change, to bring that cultural change. We need a mechanism to set the issue management process. We have to fix those defects. So we need to bring the stakeholders together. We have to get their buying and then get those defects fixed. Then only we can create the right level of data that we want. So I would say data governance and data quality go hand in hand. Data quality in a way is a subset of data governance, is one of the components of successful data governance. But data governance goes beyond data quality as well. Like data governance in analytics will help you create the right metadata that your organization needs, like the definitions. For example, if an analytics user wants to model, he needs some 10 elements for his model. One of them says balance. Now, how does he know which balance he has to pick? Now, there can be 10 different types of balance fields in your data. Unless you have a definition that tells you this is my daily balance, this is my monthly balance, this is my summarized balance, this includes something, this excludes something, you don't know what it means. So you're right, metadata is very important. Analytics user needs to know which are my golden sources or my master data where he can pick the correct data from. That's again something that's achieved to a large extent through governance. And most importantly, if you have categorical elements in modeling, oftentimes you have some elements like employment, statuses, etc. So you don't know what those reference data really means unless you have a reference data repository. This is again something that is achieved through data governance. So data governance and data quality has to go hand in hand, and together they add a lot of value to analytics users, and they are very essential.
Thank you. Ellen, what would you say there? How do you combine them? Obviously, the end result is good. How do you actually manage to combine them successfully?
It's really how you identify key data elements with the data stewards. You have to have a methodology, and it starts with either you pick a domain or they're working on a specific report or data set, right? And they identify the key data elements, they define them, they set thresholds on them. And as they're doing that, the data quality team on my end, it's really important to start seeing and understanding where they are targeting the data, and you profile that data, and you basically set, a baseline, and this goes, to speak how you get buy-in and understanding, because most people don't know how bad their data or how good it is, and it's a simple Six Sigma process improvement approach, right? If you don't measure it, you can't monitor it, you can't improve it. So you've got to get use data profiling, start profiling the data, and you teach the data stewards how to use the profiling tool to also create definitions and then business rules and data quality rules, because then they can really narrow down on, what is impacting my data quality? Is it null values when they shouldn't be null? Why am I going to have any other data quality rules? It's a waste of time. Put in some null checks and things like that. So it really requires, and you can also publish the scores in your glossary depending on your tool. So people can get a sense of, oh, okay, I understand what profit is, or I understand what haircut rate. This term is in this domain, and the health is pretty good, or good enough for me, or it's excellent, or it has issues. And so that's how it's tied all together. You can't really do data governance and data quality real well apart. I just don't think it works that well. You can do it over time, but it doesn't work that well if they're not married together.
Okay, Matt, what would you add in terms of also the quality of the analytics resulting from this?
Well, it's great because we're going to give three really lovely harmonious answers. I had also made notes on the fact that you've got to have this harmony between bottom up and top down, governance and quality working together. I think it leverages again that idea of interoperability. So you can leverage catalogs and data governance, and then location data from a lineage platform. You can publish quality data into a lineage system, establish where the quality issues are arising in your data value chain, and then do something about it. More specifically, in terms of what my friends in my AI team have been working on most recently is in the application in network link analysis. So performing advanced analytics on knowledge graphs, it stands to reason that those graphs are only going to be as good as the data that's been put into them. We can dramatically increase the accuracy and coverage and fine-grained detail of the graph by giving it good quality data and then using the platform to find links between nodes in the graph. Alex Brown, who's our CTO, likes to quip that this avoids it becoming an ignorance graph as long as you ensure that the quality of the information is high. And I think that's something we can all agree we want to avoid. Fundamentally, for firms at any stage of a data management journey, it is going to take exactly what Ellen and Viral have had to say. It's going to be a combination of data quality and data governance working in unity. That can be whether you're equipped with all of the best tools out of the box, some of them or none of them, because ultimately this is about being able to react quickly to emerging data sources and data standards.
Okay, that's great. Well, let's see the poll results if we may, and see if we have a fourth. Indeed, we do. Concurring agreement, we do. So, Matt, I don't think there's a lot to say, but would you like to comment on that result?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think one of the things that's interesting about that is that nearly half of the people are saying that they have managed to already, to a great extent, combine data quality and data governance to improve analytics. That's kind of what we've been saying anyway, so it's in agreement with us. But the fact that some people have already said either not at all or to a small extent still demonstrates how much there is to go. And as has already been mentioned so many times already, including just with the people who are voting right now, is an awful lot of that comes down to a question of culture. If you can't connect your actual business-driven goals, what you're trying to achieve, to the data that you're responsible for, if data is always a risk and a threat, you're never going to actually be able to improve the analytics that you get out of it. So whilst it's heartwarming that it says to a great extent at the top, I would say there's still some work to do, and that's ultimately going to be a question of culture.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And on that question of culture, I haven't forgotten. Nick, let me come back to you. Some top tip 3 kind of ideas to help and really get started here.
Well, the main one is got to be trying to find ways to reward people. So you need to encourage the right behaviours, and that can be through measures like funds transfer pricing for accurate data, accuracy of data. So you charge people based on the accuracy or inaccuracy for the funds they use in their business teams. You can do things culturally. One of the things I've seen work very well, although it's difficult to get off the ground sometimes, is embed a culture of find and fix. So people own the problems that they spot. They don't just ignore it. They don't assume somebody else is going to deal with it. They own it until such point as it has been resolved. Which can take a mass. It's a little bit like continuous improvement when that first came out as an idea, and people came up with suggestions, but didn't necessarily want to follow it through. So there's quite a bit of traction needed in there, cultural change to make that happen, and it needs senior executive support. The other side of it is really around cost improvement, and trying to find ways to reduce the costs, not just the incentives, but also the cost side of the equation. And get people to realise that if they do cost-saving activities, that those will potentially increase the pot of rewards that are available for them to share on. So, 2 of them are about the money. One of them is about ownership of cultural ownership.
Okay, David, what would you say to help somebody with big cultural issues?
Yeah, all good really points by Nick. I guess I can add, one is you have to identify your culture drivers in your firm, the drivers that often are tied, the ones that are the best drivers in a situation like this could be your revenue drivers, and finding the advocates. I know that not everything we should invest in our firm can always be directly tied to revenue growth or a commercial strategy, but it does help. We have to we have to recognize the fact that at the end of the day, C-suite decisions are often made by, the influence of our revenue drivers. So I think you have to be realistic about that. I think you have to be self-aware when you're in this space. At the same time, I think there's a bottoms-up buying that needs to happen as well. I think people fear anytime. This could be the same as automation in general. Automate. I have a lot of experience in automation and change management through automation. People have fear of change in general, and I think when it comes to adopting a data governance strategy, sometimes people fear that their decisions that were made in the past will get second guessed. They will be held accountable for problems that are low lying in the systems, and those are usually the people you need to get the most buy-in from, because those are the people that are going to have to unwind all the skeletons in the closet to make this solution real, operationable, and I think, we often forget about getting the buy-in at the lower level, because those are the people that are going to grind it out too. It's you can get sponsorship, you can get we can show there is executive level sponsorship, but then when it comes to actually working through all the legacy issues, you're going to need your domain experts who might have been part of the problem to this point, and getting them to see the value in this and that they're going to be valued in this process, and not replaced, is really, really important as well. So I think there's a little bit of a top down, a little bit of bottom up. But I do think that it is a change management issue. I think anytime you're adapting new technologies, new policies, especially in established businesses, it should be treated like a change management issue. It comes back to the psychology and how people view the opportunity, because the tools are there. It's a matter of who are going to be using the tools, and again, who are going to grind it out when you're 6 months, 9 months into the project, and there's a lot of really, really hard decisions to be made, and people have to make compromises. The people you're going to be relying on at that point are probably the people that were part of this process well before this, and you have to get their buy-in and get them to want to invest in this, and not, quite honestly, work against you in some cases too, where they can find ways to make it not possible. You need to find people that want to make this work.
Okay, thank you. I hope that answers the question, but I do have another couple of questions. Let's stop for those as we are here at the moment. And can I come to you, Vil? A question. This one says, achieving data quality and combining it with governance is costly. How can we manage down the costs? Is that a possibility?
Yes, certainly. So the cost actually directly goes with the benefit that we want to be looking at. And also to manage costs, we need to look at the what's the scope? What is the scope of my activity directly tied to my business objective? So if we do our governance right, so from the governance, if we know what's my business objective, and if we identify the correct scope and the correct elements, so like often in data quality, we look at the critical data elements. So that the most important elements that's going to drive my business objective. So that can help us manage the cost if we can arrive at a consensus with our critical elements, and then take it from there, and all our governance measures like data quality, bit metadata, reference data, and then gradually increase our scope. So okay, that I think that always helps. So that helps us to have quick wins. We can over a bit of time we can at least claim that we have finished something, we have achieved something. And once done that, then we can always increase the scope. Don't try to do take a very large scope at the at the onset, because then the cost will be high and the risk of failures will also be high.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. And I have one for Matt here, I think. Tell me if you want to take this one on. How can data science, AI, and ML be used to achieve faster and more accurate analytics? I know a lot of people talk about ML, a lot of people talk about AI, but actually the practical nature is not always as easy as it sounds. How can they really be used well to improve analytics, not just to do analytics?
Yeah, well, it's an excellent question. I suspect I will only really scratch the surface, but I would almost say from a principal point of view, and I'll go into this in a bit later on as well, is how it's going to be done. It's got to be done from an explainable point of view. So if you set out at the outset to say, I want to be able to use machine learning here to automate a whole lot of stuff and predict a whole lot of stuff, but you're not actually building in the understanding of being able to explain those decisions further down the line, then when you're not going to be able to understand what that model is going to teach you, you're not going to be able to predict what's going to happen next if a factor changes. A really good example actually was in fraud detection. For an awfully long time, one of the data elements that was used as a critical measure of fraud detection was purchasing one-way flights. That was a pretty handy ready reckoner for a fraudulent transaction. But of course, as soon as the COVID pandemic hit, an awful lot of people bought one-way flights to go home. So not only did people need to do that for legitimate reasons and not get those flights declined, those payments declined because they wanted to actually travel home, it also completely ruined the data set. So you can't now rely on that data set to be able to make predictions as to what constitutes a fraudulent transaction. There's another brilliant one with insurance where car insurance claims went down off a cliff, because people weren't driving anymore, but house insurance claims went up. So for me, it's about being able to, before you even get as far as that point of analytics, it's about being able to say, what is this data that I'm using? Is it reliable for this purpose? Can I explain what's going to happen? Have I used the right sort of methods of explainability in machine learning to be able to say this was the right data set and these are the right predictions? It's more complex. Fiona Brown, who runs AI for us, she can give you a pretty robust answer as well. So.
Okay, thank you. Okay, any other questions? Oh, very welcome. So please do send them in if you'd like to. Meantime, let me come back to you, David, to tell us a tale about a case study of how data quality and governance are used to support accurate analytics.
Yeah, I mean, I'll talk about a specific product in Bloomberg, our corporate events product that, it's a bit of a legacy product. It's sort of a foundational product for trading, for back office, wasn't really seen as something that was one of our headline products at Bloomberg. We developed an internal maturity assessment model for our data sets in Bloomberg. And we use industry standard scorecards, and we look at things like the technology, the quality, all the things we're talking about here, quality control processes, governance structures. And what it led us down specifically for corporate events was that, while we've been selling this product for 20 years, we found situations of sloppiness of data that was no longer being populated, stored incorrectly. We were losing fidelity. We had missed opportunities for better business rules and places we could be improving our time to market through automation. Even the interoperability, when you think about comparing one entity to the next entity, we were realizing how difficult it was for our clients to be able to compare like-to-like entities within our corporate events database. And again, this was a product that's been out there for 20 years. We've never really done that type of profiling and assessment. And what we were able to do was repackage by addressing these problems, these opportunities as well, we're able to repackage it as an ISO standard now. And it's a commercial opportunity for us. So it's a product that, really we haven't made, large, we haven't taken large investments in growing our coverage. We just got better at what we were currently doing and realized all the gaps in what we were currently doing. And now we can repackage it as a standard, but again, that's now seen as a premium product. And it's a really good example of putting these procedures in place that can drive commercial strategy, which I think that's where we were able to get more buy-in here and make the investments, because we were able to tie it towards making our offering seen as a more premium product that adheres to a standard such as ISO.
Thank you. Matt, tell us a story about the good things that come out of putting quality and governance together for analytics.
Happily. One of the things that the tech team at Datactics is working on at the minute is something arising from the EU's fifth anti-money laundering directive. So this was a knowledge graph that they've built on UK companies' house data, which is the central repository in the United Kingdom for all registered companies. And that's taken verbatim and then compared with one built with data that we've then cleaned and matched in our platform, augmented with additional linkages between corporate entities and directors that wouldn't otherwise have been visible. This is an open data challenge that's common to, I would say, all open data sources, especially where the quality of information at input is subject to varieties, issues, and intentionally misleading capture too. There's actually a fantastic entity, this is proper geeky, but you'll all like this, that is a SQL command that's written as a company's house name. I think it's injected as drop table companies. So have a look for it sometime. But things like that can cause people real problems when they're trying to use companies' house data. It's particularly relevant to manually intensive roles in KYC and AML, because obviously people are having to go through and find these things. And risk analytics relies heavily on the data from open, proprietary and internal sources, which, as I say, can be subject to a wide degree of variation, quality and standardization.
Thank you very much indeed. Okay, I think we have time to run a final poll. The question this time: what extent of operational and business benefits does your organization gain or expect to gain from combining data quality and data governance? We've touched on these. Let's see what our audience thinks. And let me come to you, Nick, to see what sort of operational and business benefits you would expect.
Okay, well, we've covered quite a few of these on the way through. It's been a hot topic on the way through this, the data quality theme. The business benefits, if you can, accuracy, avoidance of fines is one of the benefits side of it, but certainly cost reduction, significant cost reduction. If I go back to 15, 20 years ago when I was working closer to the front office than I do now, the middle office emerged as the tidy up the data set before it got shoved down the pipe to the operations team function. It was basically whatever they could get away with putting in before they got onto the next piece of revenue earning. And the quality was low. The efforts had to be put in the middle to try and tidy things up. And I think the key thing with this is if you can encourage people to try and get it right first time, and to do that, they need support from consistent and trusted reference data sets to be able to put the right stuff in across the broad topology of these organizations, so that when it feeds down through to the back end, whether it be operations, treasury or whatever, that they've got trusted data that they can work with. And that's going to save enormous costs, benefits, and we'll also see improvements in the positioning from capital weightings and all sorts of other factors as well. So all of this, all roads lead to feeling you're in a position to actually do your analytics and MI from a trusted data set, and that you then actually can make valid business decisions, coming back to one of the comments that was made earlier. Otherwise, it truly is just garbage in, garbage out.
Vera, what would you say here in terms of operational business benefits from a sort of user perspective?
Yeah, so, yeah, pretty much Nick has already summarized. And I just add a few things. Operationally, yes, I mean, if you look at traditional analytics, people work on SaaS data sets and it's very user driven. There is not much of a strategic thought that was being, that was going into it until some years back when we are now have a data governance and regulators are now, have come back onto the financial industry and asking us for a better and a more efficient way of doing aggregating our data and reporting our data. But until then, people were making their SaaS data sets. It was lying in different places. But if you go by the governance standards now that the regulators want and that the governance should really set up, it requires a more strategic way of housing your data on, and then on top of it, then you put your rules, etc. So gone are those days of every user keeping one data set with him on his personal laptop and things like that. So all distributed data, it's not going to work. There won't be any governance, etc. So yes, there's a huge operational benefit if you follow if it's done properly in a more strategic way. And in turn, it helps you to create your data privacy as well, right? Your GDPR is there, BCBS 239. No way we could the financial companies could make sure the privacy standards are being met unless the data is stored in a more secured way, controlled in an IT environment, and taken out from the user's control. So it does have both operational and business benefits, and we can achieve more regulatory compliance as well. And in turn, the accurate data helps the modelers, the modeling people, the modeling teams who do stress testing, forecast, etc. If the data is more reliable, which has more metadata on it, it helps that much, to the end user as well for their analytical activities.
Okay, let's see what it's like out there in the real world. Can we see the poll results, please? Perhaps, as you said, Nick, would you like to comment on this set?
Yeah, I mean, it's well, it's as expected. It's great to see that there are significant operational benefits being gained from doing this already. I think there's a lot of work still to be done. I was talking about cleaning up the front end and data capture side of it, but also you need to make sure that everything downstream in terms of the data, the reporting, the insights that are produced internally and for regulators. Now, the level of quality that's needed around this and governance to support that quality is exponentially stronger, because what we are starting to see, and I've got a couple of examples of it, is regulators actually talking to each other and comparing data sets. I mean, gone are the days where you'd have to explain what the data meant to the regulator. They now understand it and actually are comparing it and contrasting the submissions. So it is not a case of individuals with laptops can cook up their own reports and send them off anymore. It has to be integrated, it has to be consistent, and the quality has to improve, or the fines will just get bigger.
Okay, thank you very much indeed for that, and certainly playing out what Viraj was saying there. Let me come to you, Matt, and talk a little bit as demand rises for more advanced analytics, perhaps including elements of all those things you love, like AI and machine learning. What does the data quality and governance response have to be? Because obviously data quality is always just a bit behind, it would seem, and everybody is struggling to get to a sort of level that's really, really working well.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. There's a clear distinction, as you say, between AI for data quality and then general AI for business objectives. So the former might be something about how AI is augmenting data quality through rule inference. The latter might be decision-making driven by AI algorithms. Probably the biggest question, as you say, related to data quality is actually, is the data fit for purpose? And I've slightly touched on this already. But there's always a risk associated with data that's unreliable, shouldn't be, or isn't allowed to be used, such as an AI-generated field that infers gender from a name for some operational reason that you wouldn't necessarily be able to use for analytics because it's not a true piece of customer information. This is a data governance question, but that ultimately relies on data quality. I noticed recently that the airline TUI in the UK found this. They had a way of calculating the mass of the aircraft, its fuel and weight and distribution for takeoff. But the system was based on gender data, inferring that everyone with the title of Miss was a child. And everybody with that title was then assigned a weight of 35 kilos or 77 pounds, rather than the average adult female weight, which was nearly double that. So one flight's mass was nearly 1 1/3 tons heavier than the data showed. It's easy to say in hindsight that the governance policy shouldn't have allowed gender or title to be used as a proxy for mass. But there are flags like this, things that look or feel weird, that humans in the loop, and this is where it comes down to data quality, need to be primed to prevent and prepared to look for.
Okay, that's great. David, what would you say in terms of, as things advance, what must the data quality and governance response be?
Yeah, I'll take a slightly different angle. I think from us, a governance concern is certainly as alternative data sets are being used in different types of research, and the world becomes more open as far as what's available to be part of an analytic that might use artificial intelligence. We have to be conscious of the risk involved in that. I know someone mentioned GDPR earlier. A big part of it is understanding what your inputs are. And one, your dependency on those inputs going forward to make decisions, will they always be there? Are you compliant? And, as the standards evolve, like I'll give you an example, web crawling is a place where, it's not as regulated as maybe it should be. Web scraping, collecting internet data off the internet that's open to the public, but is programmatically harvested. You develop these dependencies on these different mechanisms. Understanding your reliance on that data and where you source it from, and your risk of being cut off from that data set is something that we consider certainly as part of our governance strategy. As far as timeliness goes, yes, I think that as the desire for more real-time output increases, and it's possible through the tools that are out there, you need to be able to remediate data issues very quickly. It cannot be a laborious process to fix the inputs or the pipelines that drive your decision-making processes, and it needs to be done with people that are available at the ready. It can't just be stored with a few domain experts that are not always able to meet the demands for speed, because what's really evolving, at least for us, is the need for more real-time resolution to our data issues. It requires a staff and an operational model that supports it. So for us, it's a little bit of risk management. I agree with everything that Matt said as far as the opportunities, but if you take the other approach of like operationalizing, the use of data through AI and more real-time analytics, you have to really think about how you manage risk and how you manage your operation from a remediation standpoint.
Okay, that's lovely. Coming to our final point on today's webinar, I'd like to ask everybody to give us a very few words just to sum up in terms of what advice they would offer to data practitioners working on data quality and governance for analytics. Ellen, can you hear us now?
Yes, I believe so. Hopefully my video will connect. I'm so sorry. Oh, I'm in and out.
There you go. Don't worry.
Yeah, data quality is, not something that can be done alone. It has to be paired with data quality incident management and policies and procedures and standards. So it's a long roadmap, but as far as the tooling goes, you definitely want to be scalable and taking advantage of machine learning and AI and scaling up there. So work on a small project. Set thresholds, use data profiling. Those are all the best ways to get up and running on that.
Thank you very much indeed.
Sure.
Nick, what would you say there?
Echo some of those, and I'll throw in culture. We've talked about culture. I mean, the critical factor is to make sure people want to improve the data and motivate them to do so. Short cycle times, so identify some substantial benefits and go for them quickly. Iterate regularly rather than trying to eat an elephant all in one go. Go bit by bit, but also make sure that as I say, you've got significant benefits in short order to try and then motivate even more support for the change. And the third bit is just make sure that that you have the right technology in place, but don't get technology led. It's still a people project because it's people who enter the data and manage and maintain it. So whilst you can put a platform in to help you with this, you have to have the hearts and minds of the people and the right expertise to help you get the value out of it.
Thank you. I'm going to come to Matt next. What would you suggest?
Very good. Well, one of my suggestions was going to be exactly what David said. So that's super efficient around the need for continual remediation of data, not just a point, fix it, and then think about it again in 3 years' time. So I'm gonna come back to the ethics piece and just say when it comes to the application in quality and in governance, absolutely everybody is responsible for how that data is going to be used and what data it is that you're looking to build your analytics on. So if somebody is writing data quality checks, they need to think at the same point as they're doing that, does this feel weird? Is it ethical? Is this the correct use of this data? Do I have all the right data to be able to make the decision? Somebody in governance needs to be thinking the same thing. And then likewise, people at analytics stage, it's not someone else's job. And I think, it sort of echoes something Nick says. It's actually quite an empowering statement to know that you're responsible for how that data is going to be used. Hopefully sort of inspires people to be a part of the solution.
Okay, a couple of words from you, David.
I agree with everything everyone said. I'll just try to add here, focus on the issues that will impact the business. Don't sweat the small stuff. Don't get caught up on things that we really ultimately won't impact the how this effort is being viewed from a success standpoint. If the magnitude and the scope of what you're trying to take on seems like it could be a deterrent, scope it down, scope it to achievable, again, impactful but achievable deliverables that will help get buy-in from the culture of the group, especially if there is, not a culture foundationally already there that would embrace something like this. And then finally, empower people from the top down to be able to direct this, even if they're not necessarily, this is their space and their comfort zone, but also empower the people from the bottom up who will help you get through the data trenches to make the hard decisions about how to classify things and how to manage things. Don't undervalue those domain experts, and empower them. Allow them to make decisions and allow them to debate and compromise and come to some sort of consensus, because that's what will scale ultimately.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you all very much indeed. We're out of time now, but I'd like to say thank you very much indeed to Semeki, Bloomberg and Didactics for sponsoring today's webinar. Before we close up, quick reminder on your additional options. You can sign up to join next week's Data Management Summit virtual or download a white paper on deploying observational learning for improved transaction data quality. That's it for today. So thank you again to Ellen, Viral, Nick, Matt, and David. And thank you to all of you who've watched the webinar. Please complete our feedback form, as we are always keen to hear your views and improve our products. Meantime, thanks again and goodbye.